Deaths from the earthquake, True Confessions from Living Witnesses. Introduction. Approximately 20,000 people were killed or missing. On March 11, 2011, the Great East Japan earthquake struck, primarily in the Sanriku region of Tohoku, claiming many lives. Immediately after the disaster, public opinion and mood in this country became emotional, sentimental, and sentimental. We saw on television images of people breaking down in tears in the distant Tohoku region, feeling sorry for them, and unconditionally praised the self-defense forces who appeared there. Furthermore, we described the firefighters who died with their heads held high as a symbol of wartime and post-war Japan. The town hall woman who continued to call for evacuation over the disaster prevention radio until the very end was praised as a tragic heroine. From this atmosphere, slogans such as, "Let's do our best, Japan," "Let's do our best, Miyagi," "I wait, Fukushima." This emotional, sentimental, and intuitive public opinion cooled within a few months. Nearly a year has passed since the disaster. There has been almost no momentum to examine why 20,000 people died and remain missing. The true nature of the disaster was not grasped, discussion continued, and the lessons learned were not applied to the future. The tragedy was repeated thereafter. In September, Typhoon Faxai struck Wakayama and Noro prefectures, killing nearly 100 people. I wanted to examine the deaths of the approximately 20,000 people who died or went missing. Ever since covering the earthquake and tsunami on Okushiri Island in Hokkaido nearly 20 years ago, I have believed that disaster deaths are caused by the awareness of local residents. In order to verify this hypothesis, I thought it would be appropriate to collect testimonies from people who were on the front lines of death from the time of the disaster and immediately afterwards. I hoped that compiling these testimonies into a book would reveal new value. Its value is left to the reader's discretion. In Chapter 1, I interviewed the doctors and dentists who performed autopsies on the bodies. What happens to the body when it's caught in a tsunami? Why does it lead to death? Furthermore, how do the bodies change? These are still not reported in detail in many media outlets. This means that the true nature of earthquakes and tsunamis cannot be grasped through the destruction of bodies. As long as we perceive natural disasters as merely fearful, we will continue to repeat the same mistakes. In that sense, I have included testimony from doctors. Furthermore, the media has not fully penetrated the hearts and minds of the bereaved. In particular, they have not been able to convey the intense biorhythms of the bereaved's minds, in other words, the reality of the violent death known as earthquake death. To this end, I obtained testimony from a psychiatrist who counsels bereaved families. In Chapter 2, I delved into the reality of earthquake death through interviews with bereaved families. We asked them about the circumstances of March 11th, the circumstances that led to their family members' deaths, and the subsequent changes in their hearts and lives. Reading these testimonies, we believe you will gain a sense of the insurmountable sadness of suddenly losing a loved one. Why is life so precious? Why do families support each other? And what was it that broke those invisible chains? We want you to think about these things. When selecting the surviving family members, we tried to ensure there was no bias in terms of disaster area, age, occupation, or family structure. Over the past 10 months, we have spoken to approximately 110 surviving family members. Of these, we officially requested interviews with about 20. 8 agreed. Chapter 2 introduces 6 surviving family members, and Chapters 3 and 5 introduce 2 more. The surviving family members are the main players in the disaster, and they are the ones who need support. This sentiment is one of the messages of this book. In Chapter 3, I interviewed people involved in saving lives and searching for bodies, including firefighters, police, the Japan Coast Guard, and rescue dog trainers. When covering incidents and accidents, these public relations agencies are very strict. Interviews don't always go as planned. This time, all of the witnesses spoke in depth. Reading their testimonies from the perspective of why 20,000 people died or went missing provides material for thinking about disaster prevention and crisis management. I particularly want readers to understand the reality of firefighters. They were both the greatest contributors and the greatest victims. Chapter 4 focused on how the media reports on deaths in the earthquake. I interviewed the editorial staff of the Mainichi Shimbun and Shukan Bunshun, and recorded the testimonies. These two publications provided meaningful coverage. The Shukan Bunshun editorial staff requested that the testimonies end with polite, concise language. I believe they wanted to leave a soft impression on readers. I find significance in the fact that this magazine confronts death and raises this issue. So, even though the endings of the sentences are not consistent across the entire book, I decided to include them. In Chapter 5, I asked scholars and researchers who study earthquakes and tsunamis to share their experiences. In Japan, there are over 30 researchers with a strong track record studying natural disasters. I selected someone who has visited the disaster-stricken areas multiple times and conducted thorough interviews with residents. I would like readers to read the testimonies while paying attention to the structure and mechanisms of earthquakes and tsunamis, and their relationship to residents' evacuation awareness. Taking into account the relationship between these two factors, I believe disaster prevention and crisis management measures will become more practical. Finally, I included the voice of a member of parliament who lost 4 family members and his secretary. Immediately after the earthquake, the member of parliament called for learning the reality of the disaster-stricken areas. Even now, many people are immersed in an emotional, sentimental, and sensory atmosphere, without grasping the true nature of the disaster-stricken areas. Taking this into consideration, we chose members of parliament to testify. This book was made possible through the sincere responses of these witnesses. We would like to express our sincere gratitude. This book was also created with the support of Diamond Ink. Editors Atsuyuki Ogawa and Takuya Obi. Despite the difficult subject matter, they did not hesitate to give us this opportunity. We would like to express our gratitude. We would also like to express our deepest gratitude to our readers. Based on the voices of over 20 witnesses, we hope to consider together the truth behind the 20,000 people who died and went missing. January 2012 Norifumi Yoshida Table of Contents Disaster Deaths Introduction Table of Contents Chapter 1 The Scars of the Great Earthquake as Seen by a Doctor Testimony 01 The Messages of Tsunami Bodies Witnessed by a Coroner The Case of Kurin University Associate Professor Tetsuya Tokogi Testimony 02 The Contradiction and Anxiety a Dentist Experienced at the Morgue The Cases of Nippon Dental University Professor Tamiyuki Tsuzuki and Lecturer Kaori Iwahara Testimony 03 A Psychiatrist Sounds the Alarm, Grief with No End in Sight The Case of Nozomi Asakai, Deputy Director of the Tokyo Metropolitan Institute of Medical Science Lessons from Chapter 1 Chapter 2 How the Bereaved Perceived the Death of a Family Member Testimony 04 The Pain of a Father Who Continually Searched for His Daughter in a Nuclear Power Plant Town The Case of Tsukosa Shirakawa, Cafe Owner, Yokosuka City, Kanagawa Prefecture Testimony 05 As long as I live, I want to leave a legacy of my husband, daughter, and son's lives. The Case of Ogata Teiko, a nurse from Higashimatsushima City, Miyagi Prefecture. Testimony 06 Praying for the safety of my family members stranded in their apartment building. The Case of Ota Kaori, Managing Director of Ishinomaki Funeral Home. Testimony 07 The dried-up tears of a store owner who lost 3 family members while guiding evacuations. The Case of Yoshida Hiroshi, an electrical shop owner from Rikuzentata City, Iwate Prefecture. Testimony 08 The labyrinth of disaster damage that led bereaved families to file lawsuits. The cases of Koneko Yenori from Kanagawa Prefecture and Kobayashi Kazuo from Tokyo. Lessons from Chapter 2. Chapter 3 What searchers felt at the tsunami scene. Testimony 09 The contradictions in social structure that led to the deaths of 253 firefighters. The case of Omori Hideki, a firefighter from Kameishi City, Iwate Prefecture. Testimony 10 the despair and undying determination of a police officer who flew over the tsunami. The case of Miyagi Prefectural Air Corps Captain Satoshi Narita and pilot Hitoshi Hira. Testimony 11. The little hero who continued searching for missing people until he lost his sense of smell. The case of disaster rescue dog trainer Shinobu Murata and his rescue dog, Layla. Testimony 12. What tsunami lessons did a diver see on the dangerous ocean floor? The case of Nataka Otoni, diving team leader of the Japan Coast Guard patrol vessel Okitsu. Testimony 13. The intense work experienced by self-defense force members in actual combat without live ammunition. The case of Masahisa Soto, member of the House of Councillors, LDP. Lessons from Chapter 3. Chapter 4, How the Media Reported Death. Testimony 14. Why the Mainichi Shimbun continues to tackle. March 11. The cases of Katsumi Hirota, Deputy Director of the Editorial Planning Department at the Mainichi Shimbun, and Fumero Hayasaka, Deputy Director of the Social Affairs Department. Testimony 15. Weekly Bunshun's photographic reporting confronting unjust death. The cases of Kosuke Yanai, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Weekly Bunshun, and photographer Takashi Shimizu. Testimony 16. The innocence and cruelty surrounding the victims and their families. Cases of victims and their families I met through my reporting. Lessons from Chapter 4. Chapter 5. Why did the death toll increase so much? Testimony 17. The destructive power of the world's most brutal undertow and basin phenomenon. The case of Yoshinobu Tsuji, Associate Professor at the Earthquake Research Institute, University of Tokyo. Testimony 18. Why did damage increase in areas frequently hit by tsunamis? The case of Ichiro Matsu, Director of the NPO Disaster Management and Environmental Policy Research Institute. Testimony 19. The key figure behind the Kameishi miracle explains the myth of safety. The case of Toshitoka Kateda, Professor at Gunma University Graduate School. Testimony 20. To ensure that deaths are not in vain, we need people to see the reality of the disaster-stricken areas. The case of Toru Kikawada, member of the House of Representatives, Democratic Party. Lessons from Chapter 5. Testimony 01. The message of a tsunami-hit body witnessed by an autopsy physician. The case of Tetsuya Takogi, Associate Professor at Kurin University. What happens to people when they are caught in a tsunami? Very few media outlets have reported on this topic in detail. We interview the autopsy physician who examined the body and bring this taboo subject to light. Damage expansion due to familiarity with evacuation. Among the bodies we autopsied, some were carrying large amounts of money. Some had as much as 20 million yen in cash. Some had securities, and others even land title deeds. It seems likely that they had gathered these items in one place in the house, planning to evacuate with them when the tsunami hit. It didn't look like they had hastily found them and put them on immediately after the earthquake. Associate Professor Tetsuya Takogi, Kurin University, 43, who specializes in forensic medicine, spoke in a low, clear voice. The interview was conducted in early July. Takogi is a forensic pathologist known for his extensive autopsies of suspicious bodies. He has provided forensic and medical supervision for numerous dramas and films, including Voice, The Voice of the Lost, Fuji TV. Immediately after the March 11 earthquake, he entered the disaster area at the request of the National Police Agency, along with 9 other doctors, 5 of whom were dentists. He prefaced his remarks by saying that he was born and raised near Miyako in Iwate Prefecture as a child, and continued, "The adults in this area had been told many times before that a tsunami was coming, and were accustomed to evacuating. This made it a rut, and they may have assumed that a large tsunami would not come this time either, which led to them being late in evacuating. Perhaps their habit of evacuating was to blame." On the evening of March 13, he boarded a Metropolitan Police Department emergency vehicle and headed from Tokyo to Miyagi Prefecture. Roads along the coast of Miyagi Prefecture were destroyed, and traffic restrictions were in place. There was also a power outage. He stayed at a business hotel in front of Junior Yamagata Station with other doctors. From there, he traveled every morning at 7 a.m. in a police vehicle to Miyagi Prefectural Police Headquarters, Sendai City. Upon arriving at the headquarters, he held a 30-minute meeting with the police. There, each doctor decided which morgue would be responsible for the bodies. The doctors then boarded separate police vehicles and headed to the morgue. At the time, there were around 10 morgues in Minami Sanriku town, Keisenuma city, Watari town, and elsewhere in the prefecture. Most of these were junior high and high school gymnasiums. As it was immediately after the earthquake, numerous bodies were floating along the coastline nearby, mixed in with the debris. The morgues were divided into areas for placing the bodies, performing autopsies, and identifying the bodies, using ping-pong tables as partitions. Starting 3 or 4 days after the earthquake, people who came looking for parents or children would break down in tears as they found bodies. Autopsies continued every day until sunset, around 4 or 5 p.m. After this, they could not be performed due to power outages. The bodies were brought in by the self-defense forces, the Japan Coast Guard, the police, the fire department, and other organizations. At its peak, as many as 200 bodies were lined up in the gymnasium in a single day. First, the police would take photographs of the bodies, still covered in mud. After that, they wash off the mud in the school pool or other water, and then they take close-up photos of their faces. Then, their identities are confirmed.